Hello. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create a virtual machine using Ansible-pull in one step. Now, the one step's a bit of clickbait because there's actually a whole lot of steps that are going on. When talking about Ansible-pull, I want to make the point that Ansible-pull is really the last step of many that you're going to have to set up. So if you were wondering how to set up Ansible-pull and you looked at the documentation, you would come here and see, oh, this is super easy. In fact, that's what everybody says is it's easy. And yes, it is, but you need to have a well-oiled setup before you even think about Ansible-pull. And that's what the majority of this video is going to be. I will go over Ansible-pull, but I don't have to show you what else you're going to have to do to get to that point where you're ready to use it. Uh, the experience level you're going to need as you're watching this, I would expect you to be a fairly advanced admin to where you know SSH inside and out. You need to be very comfortable hopping inside and out of machines. You need to be able to set up public and private key pairs. If you know all that, you should be able to follow along. If you don't, I'm going to try and explain this as well as I can, but things may get a little bit difficult. I want to make the point real quick that this is going to be a very high overview, and I won't be able to go into details on all this. I'll try and show you some of the scripts I use, but I'm really trying to convey the concept of what you're going to need to be able to do to get a machine from starting from no virtual machine at all to up and running in production in one click. It's the concept I want to convey, not the specific steps. And I'm going to have to skip a lot as well because there just isn't enough time to cover every single topic in this. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're going to create the virtual machine and we're going to put that in the background as it's going, and then I'll explain what that's doing as it's running. So I don't think anyone wants to watch the virtual machine being created for 15 minutes. So we're going to call this video test. Notice I'm on my hypervisor. Okay, so that's kicking off right now, and here we go, video test. So that's going to go on in the background. Let's minimize this. We'll come back to that later. So that was the one script. Click. Let me background that. That was it. Now how is that working? I'm going to show this diagram here, and it is going to be very ugly. Pay no attention to all these pipes and everything. That was just so I could fit it all on one screen. I just wanted to display what's happening. We're going to take this one at a time, and I will explain each step as well as I can. So first off, I'm on my laptop right here. This is what you're looking at, and we're connecting to the KVM host over SSH. Since I have my virtualization host over Wi-Fi, I had to do some crazy networking stuff. You can go ahead and look at KVM networking on your own time. That's a whole discussion on its own. But basically, you need to get this set up to where you can manage the virtualization host with the proper permissions and everything. And that's every service ever. You're always going to have pain, a bunch of pain when you're trying to set up authentication. You just got to get it over with and do it. That's the fun part, though. So what we just ran was this virt install script. Let's take a look at that. So all I'm doing is I'm just wrapping the virt install. I mean, I normally like to write better scripts, but this is just a quick little thing. And as you can see, I take the first positional parameter from my bash script, save it to a variable, and that is the VM that we're creating. So the two parts that we see in this diagram right here is I'm actually pulling the install files over from a web server, and I'm pulling the kickstart file from a web server. Just to talk about the install files, you'll see here I say tac L for location as far as virt install is concerned. And then this is my web server 122.10. And just so you can see it being pulled, what I'm going to do is forward port 9000 over port 80 to the web server. Okay, so I'm forwarding that port. And you can see the script was saying, hey, go down here to 122.10, cobbler, kickstart, mir, Centos7. Let's go there, ks mir, Centos7, and here's the install media. So right off the bat, we have the script that we ran saying, okay, the install media, go pull this from a web server. And that's where it's getting pulled from. Now, a lot of the work is being done on this kickstart file here. The script is just saying, hey, as a kernel parameter, we're going to say int.ks equals same web server, cobbler, kickstarts, virtual dhcp-ks.config. Let's go take a look at that. Okay, so here's the kickstart file, and a kickstart file is what you would use to automatically provision servers on Red Hat, CentOS, and Fedora. I'm not sure if you can use it in other distributions, but I know it's used for those. This is standard kickstart stuff. One thing that annoys me to death about Kickstart is just not there's not very good documentation on how it really works, especially on the pre and post scripts. You kind of just gotta look around on the internet for working configurations, copy and paste it. In fact, that's what I did on this pre-script right here. This is somebody else's pre-scripts. You can go there, look at that. That was somebody else's pre-script as well. So we'll take a look at the pre-script first, and essentially what this is doing is when we installed using this virt install script right here, we passed it an extra argument and we called it server name. And this is a kernel parameter that we're passing to it. And that's what was the first positional parameter when I ran the script. And it's being saved to hostname.domain. My domain is my first last name.com. You would change that to whatever your domain is. And we're passing that as a kernel parameter. It's very important that we set the host name right when provisioning, or else you're going to screw up your dynamic DNS, which is required for this. And you don't want to screw that up because then you got to go like freeze your DNS server, delete the record, and unfreeze it. It's just a pain in the butt. So you really want this to work when provisioning. So the pre-script right here is basically saying, hey, look in the kernel parameters, which is found in this proc command line, and loop through that. If you find the phrase server name star, which is anything after server name, go ahead and evaluate that, which sets server name equal to whatever it was set equal to. The script says server name is equal to newhost.domain. So what it gets evaluated to is what we called the host name, which is videotest.lukepafford.com. And it comes in here and it writes that networking information to tempnetwork.ks, which the kickstart will then consume, and it'll set the host name properly. So that's this part right here, this pre-hook part of the kickstart, pre and section, and that will allow us to set a host name when provisioning. Now, the post hook is where the Ansible-pull is going to kick in. So all that we've done up to this point is just automatically configure a server, which takes care of provisioning. However, we haven't done any configuration management. This post is what does that. So all I'm really doing is from the same web server, I'm curling down the client install script that I wrote, which configures Ansible-pull on the client. Now, you don't have to use my script. You don't have to use a script. You could do that manually, but then you obviously lose the automatic process. So we'll go ahead and take a look at my script. It's pulling down right here. Oh, before we go to where the script is at, just want to make sure it's curling this down right here and saving it to user local bin. It makes it executable, and then it executes the script. This is kind of a good little pattern for your PostScript. You don't want to fill that up with a whole bunch of stuff. What you should do in your PostScript is write a monolithic script, which I know is kind of bad practice, but there's just no getting around it when it comes to provisioning. Put that in a script, and then execute it and let that take care of everything instead of dumping it all in this post, put in a script, and it makes it nice and clean, as you can see. So here's the scripts. It's actually going to download it. So let's go take a look at that file. Find it. Okay. So this is a client script, and you can write it however you want. This is the way I did it. The main bread and butter here is I'm actually generating a private public key pair with the SSH keygen utility, and I'm saving the private key in this variable, and I'm saving the public key. So what this means is you're going to have the same private key for all of your servers that hook into your remote Git server. See if I have that explained or visualized in this diagram. So this Ansible-pull bootstrap script in this diagram right here, which is what this script is, will be pulled down from the HTTP server. It'll configure Ansible-pull, and it will communicate with the Git server. Like I said, the kickstart is where a lot of the meat is, and this Ansible-pull bootstrap client script is where a lot of the meat is for this. And this, if you're familiar with SSH, this shouldn't be a surprise on what the script is doing. It's really just making sure you have the public-private key set up, and it also configures the Ansible-pull cron job. Before we go to the cron job, I just want to take a look at the server that had this script ran on it, and I'll show you exactly what it's doing. So this script was created with the Ansible-pull bootstrap, and you see this svc get. Hello, you need to go out of there. Okay. svc get, and then those are the keys that were written from the script, and you can see it was pulled down from the kickstart. So I just wanted to show you, like, that's what the server actually looks like once it's done. I'm a little distracted right here. For some reason, this script went to grub. This VM here, it popped up and said, hey, I'm in grub. Why is it in grub? I'm actually going to reboot. I'm actually going to reboot that machine right now. Let's, hello. Okay, so if this worked, it should come back up here. Yep. All right, we'll log into this machine in a minute. Okay, so that's coming up. We'll come back to that later. All right, back to what we were talking about. If I can find it. We had this Ansible-pull bootstrap script. Here we go. So I kind of just showed you what happens when the script is ran on that server. Now we need to look at the Ansible-pull cron. This is what sets up the automatic part of the Ansible-pull. You can see here I just set up this here doc, which writes this to the file. I have all these variables here. Let's kind of show you where it's getting those values from. So we have all these local variables here. Yeah, I know it's this could have been done a little bit better, but it's whatever. So we have this cron frequency here set to every 15 minutes. It just gets fed to this variable. Don't be intimidated by all these variables. I was just kind of creating functions to make it neat. It didn't have to be this complex, but I wanted some air checking on this script. So I kind of modularized a little bit of the roles. So this gets written here, and that'll be saved to etcron-d/Ansible-pull, and then we will have automatic Ansible-pull being ran. Now, at this point, you're going, okay, I might be following along here, but how is Ansible-pull doing what it's doing? Let's pull up the man page. So this is the key part. If you haven't, if you've read it and you haven't really understood it, I'll actually have you see it and see how that works. Optional argument: file name .yaml. The name of one of the YAML formats to run is an Ansible playbook. Blah blah blah. If not provided, Ansible-pull will look for a playbook based on the host's fully qualified domain name, on the host name, and finally a playbook called local.yaml. Well, when configuring Ansible-pull, I found that the easiest thing to do is create the local.yaml file. So if we go to my repo, my Git repo where I store all my Ansible configurations, I have this simple local.yaml file right here. When I open it, this should explain to you how all the hosts are going to get their own unique configurations, and it'll still be a single playbook. I have an all section where they will get all the same configurations, so you could have all the same packages you want on each host, especially a security baseline, if that's what you called your role or whatever you called that. All the hosts would get that. Individual hosts could get the roles as specified like this. And as you can see, this wouldn't get too crazy out of control. Let's say I had 50 servers in here and they had their own individual roles. Yeah, it'd be 50 lines, but what you would probably do is create some groups. So I really wouldn't expect this local.yaml file to really ever grow past like 200 lines if you're keeping it nice and clean. So that's the local.yaml file. I have a Git server, a local one called bcs git01, and then you push your configuration to that server. And then the Git server will have that available. And then when we go back to our Ansible pull, we can see the Ansible pull script configures to pull from that server. And here in the variables, we have this configured Git server. So it's going to go down, and then we look at this cron job. It's going to say you. We're going to configure over the account that we want, the Git server, and then the repo. I also want to say the reason I created the private public keys is I didn't want to have my servers pulling over like HTTP or anything. I like to have it's as secure as it can be for being an automated solution because it's over SSH. So all the clients are pulling over SSH from the remote server. So that's the Ansible-pull cron job. When we go, this is a server that has already had it configured. I want to show you what that looks like when it runs. See here, this was created. We'll go ahead and run this. And that's what Ansible-pull looks like when it ran correctly. So you can see it did the all, my intranet root certificates. It made sure those were added. That's a role I created. But then it skipped because those hosts don't apply. So as you can see, the same local.yaml file will apply for each host, and it will only get the configurations if you specified it. So my KVM host will actually have this role execute because it's a part of that KVM group. Now we'll go look at the machine that we did create. And I've been having some problems logging into it from my laptop, so we're actually going to log into it from the inside over here. I don't know why I pulled it up right here. So let's get into this thing. Video test. Look at that. So again, this was the server we created at the beginning of the video. And it should have Ansible installed. Yes, it does. It should have the cron job created. Yes, it does. We're going to go ahead and run this. Now, I'm expecting this to fail because in my host file, if I can get to it, you can see I don't have anything in here called video test, so it should say, hey, I don't find myself in this, but we're going to run it anyways just to see if that's what happens. So what you would have to do is when you create that host, you'd also have to add it to your Ansible host file. So I said one step. I know, there's a little bit of a lie. Okay, it does not match any hosts, which makes sense. So if I were to modify my host file and add that in here, and then push that up to my Git server, it would then be running that scheduled pull, and it will pull whatever configurations I specify. So I want to do a little review here. I want to see if there's any parts I haven't touched on very well. I will say that in my environment, I am running dynamic DNS DHCP. That's what lets it get its IP and let me SSH automatically without any interaction. You would do well to look up how to do that on your own and get that set up. One key thing I want to mention is the SSH config file. I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the video. If you haven't set up an SSH config file, you could forget everything I've said. Go read everything you can about that. It's one of the best things that you can get in the habit of doing. Because as you can see, for different hosts, there's some ports. If I didn't have this config file, I'd have to have this all memorized, and that's just not possible. Save this in your config file. The big thing is like this proxy command is a very powerful line. Basically, before I log into any of my hosts, because they're all natted on my virtualization host, I have to first proxy to the virtualization host and then get inside my host. So the SSH config file is very important and very beneficial. So I want to summarize and basically say the two big things I was using, well, the three really, is on the KVM host, I had an install script that was pulling down install files and the kickstart. From the kickstart, there was the pre-hook section, which got the host name, and then the post-hook, which says, hey, run this Ansible-pull bootstrap script, just what I called it. It doesn't have to be called that. And it will configure the client to where it can properly automate or automatically connect to the remote Git server and pull its configurations. The actual Ansible-pull part was just the single liner. So yeah, Ansible-pull is just a one-liner you throw in a cron job. That's it. Don't overthink it. Uh, and this whole setup was really just so it could be done automatically because really you kind of want to set this up and not have to come back to it. You do not want any part of this to be a manual process because you're going to get confused. I mean, I get confused and it's fresh in my mind. Even come tomorrow when I'm not even thinking about this, I'm like, okay, what's happening here? So you really want to automate your VM creation process from start to finish. When it comes to Ansible-pull, it's really simple. It's just a one-liner. However, you need a whole lot of infrastructure behind it to make it successful. I may not have explained myself very well in this video, but I hope there were some parts that I could have cleared up if you were confused, and I hope this will help you in your DevOps journey. Thank you very much.